Welcome to Men Are the Prize, the podcast. It's here. I am here. We're going live this time. We don't typically do it live, but let's do something different. I wanted to change it up a bit. I have a great guest. We're going to have a great conversation today. If this is the first time you're seeing me or hearing of me, I'm Harvey and host of Men Are the Prize, the podcast. It is an open space for men to be open, vulnerable, and emotional. This is a space for men to talk about anything. Now, while I enjoy hearing men talk about stories or whatever's going on in their lives, the reason I created this space is because I want men to talk about anything. I want you talking. I want you vocal. I want you expressing your emotions. And this is something that's really hard for us. We haven't been raised to do that. So that's what this space is. And the point of bringing men in talking is that you men hear men, see men do it, and get more comfortable with it on your own. So that is what Men Are the Prize is. It is an open space. I have a great guest today. Before I get to my guest, I was thinking today, and I wanted to make a quick point to you men in the world. We don't always get our flowers. We don't always get positive affirmation. We don't always get told how amazing we are, the great things we do, how we take care of family, how we do this and that. But when we do, we appreciate it. But I want you to take a moment and consider this. We're not always going to get people telling us these amazing things about us. We're not always going to get those positive voices. So I want you to make sure that the most important voice, the voice that is always ringing in your head, that you always hear telling you how positive and how good you are, is your own voice. Remind yourself how intelligent you are. Remind yourself how important you are to other people in your life. Remind yourself that you're human. You make mistakes, but you come back from them stronger. Your voice should be the most powerful one for you. Never forget that. And with that said, let's go. I'm so happy to have this guest. I love getting a brother on here that's just talking about anything. But let's bring this brother in. Let's do this. Anthony McDuffie Jr., welcome to the podcast. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for this warm welcome embracing. And I'm so glad to be on your show.
I'm happy to have you here. Young brother, we're going to talk about your story. It's a story that everybody needs to hear. But before we get to that, let's talk about this. I love doing this podcast. I love a good bio. So I like printing it out and reading it. Anthony, take a moment. I'm going to talk to you about you. You ready? Here
I'm
we
ready.
go. Let's go. Anthony McDuffie Jr. is an author, motivational speaker, and spoken word artist renowned for his debut memoir, Grit, Grind, and Glory. Emerging from 15 years in prison, Anthony seized every opportunity to redefine his life, graduating from Give a Beat on a New Track Reentry Mentoring Program and finding his voice as a motivational speaker. Since then, Anthony has shared his story nationwide, igniting motivation and inspiration among the younger generation through mentorship and compelling speeches. Certified as a mental health first aider, he emphasizes mental well-being advocacy in his holistic approach to mentorship and speaking engagements. As Anthony prepares to launch his second book, book number 2, I see you, brother, My Life in Poetry, his journey continues to resonate with audiences, showcasing the transformative power of storytelling and mentorship. His narrative exemplifies the profound impact one individual can have in inspiring positive change. Anthony, first of all, what's it like hearing your accolades? What's it like hearing back what you've done?
Man, thank you for the question. It was actually beautiful and it made me feel good. It made me feel good about all of the accomplishments that I've been receiving in my life thus far because in my previous life, I did receive praise and I did receive flowers, but it was for the wrong thing. So now it feels good to be reinforced with positive affirmations about all of the work and all of the things that I've done in my life. So it felt great, man. Thank you for reading it.
Of course, of course. I do that because, like I said before, men don't typically get to hear the great things that they've accomplished. So I like to start that off on a positive note, brother. So you hear what you've done. And most importantly, we know, and I know that for you, you're so young. This is just the beginning. You're about to do big things. This is the start of a long prosperous journey. So I'm proud to see what you're about to
Thank
accomplish.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, if this is the first time that you are watching or listening to this, welcome to this space for men to be open, vulnerable, and emotional. The way I run this podcast is I take the word prize. For the letters in prize represent characteristics that I think are good for men. And we're going to talk about them. The first letter in prize is P. The word is purpose. Purpose is defined as a reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. Anthony, what is your purpose now?
Man, I love that. I love that. My purpose now is to continue the mission. And the mission for me is to ignite, the lives of young people, to make them be positive role models and examples in their lives, in their communities, in whatever sector in their world that they are. It's to create this positive and ignite this seed of change and positivity in their lives. So I think that's my purpose, is to continue to uplift the young people, giving them hope, giving them courage, giving them a different narrative, and giving them inspiration that they can see within me. Because oftentimes growing up in South Central Los Angeles, California, when you in those type of inner cities, is oftentimes you don't have a good positive example and role model to look towards and model in life, right? And so I like to say that I am that for a lot of people, and so that's my purpose, to be that inspiration for a lot of young people.
Okay. So I can imagine growing up, you didn't have, what kind of role models did you have around you, whether it's family, friends, uncles, aunts? What were you surrounded by growing up?
Right. So the circumstances around how I grew up was pretty typical with the inner city syndrome, I call it. And dealing with the inner city syndrome, you have an environment that's pretty much plagued with gangs, violence, drugs, drug abuse and addiction, a hyper police presence. So you have all of these elements, if you will, that's set to derail a young black man early on in his life. So those were the type of situations, those were the type of circumstances that I grew up in. And so I think naturally when you living in those type of circumstances and conditions, you adapt to your environment, right? And so that's kind of like what happened with me, so to speak. I adapted to my environment based on this was the only thing that I seen. So these are the type of people that I seen in the environment: drug dealers, gang members, people that's reactionary, people that is trying to cut corners to get ahead in life. These sort of people. Now, it wasn't entirely these sort of people in our community, because as we know, there's always exceptions. So you always have those people in the community who uplifts the community, look out for the community, but they're very so small in between. There's only few. It's only a chosen few of those people, and we can count on one hand or maybe two hand the amount of those people compared to a whole community of people that's involved with other things.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's good. So yeah, a lot of us, we grow up in our circumstance. I guess our environment has a lot to do with how we grow up and what we decide to do. Do you know where it kind of went wrong for you? Was there a
Absolutely.
moment you said, yeah, tell us about that?
Yeah, so where it went wrong with me is losing my father. My father was my protector. He was my guide. He was my help. He was my everything. So when I lost my father, I didn't know how to internalize that grief in a appropriate way. I was too young to understand what grief was, first of all. And second of all, I really didn't have no one at that time of my father's death to console me and hug me and, kind of let me know that everything would be okay. As a young child, I was 8 years old when I lost my father. So that became my turning point, and I remember my mother telling me as young as, maybe 9, 10 years old, she told me, son, why are you always smiling? I mean, excuse me, why are you always frowning? Why are you always frowning? And I didn't really have an answer for her at that time. But now that I look back on it in hindsight, I was always frowning because I was grieving the loss of my father. This is the mask I wore of anger, the mask I wore of not having my father figure in my life. And so that grief turned into anger. I was mad and I was always frowning because I lost my father. So that was the turning point that propelled me into, so to speak, that life of crime and that whole rabbit hole.
Okay. That's completely understandable. And I think a lot of men, we deal with that, with this inability. We haven't been taught per se how to express emotion. The only one that tends to be acceptable is anger,
Mhm.
where we can be hyper violent. That seems almost acceptable. But it's something more profound, dealing with death, sadness, despair, depression. Nobody sits you down and says, you know what? I know you're not feeling good, and that's okay. And you get that talk. And I hear, and I read your story and I talked about it, and it feels like there are moments. It's like if you'd gotten a few of those conversations, if you'd gotten a few of those hugs, where would you be?
Uh,
And that's it for our boys. That's it. It's
mhm.
where there's a few turning points that if they come through at the right time, we're in much better shape. And I feel like
Absolutely.
right now, that's what you are right now. You
Yeah.
were the voice, you were that turning point for these boys who
Yeah.
may not know somebody, but I'm like, listen, he went through that. That was his struggle. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. So I applaud you. I do this work
Yeah.
because I love helping men, and you're doing it, and you're
Thank you,
doing
brother.
using your
Thank you,
experience, and
brother.
it's wonderful,
Thank
wonderful.
you, brother.
Of course, the next letter in the word prize is R, and the word is resilience. We touched on that a little bit, but we could come back to it if we need to. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. You told us about the death of your father. That's a big deal. Is there any other situation you can think of, something that happened in your life where you found out, you know what, I'm stronger than I thought I was. I have resilience that I didn't even know was there. You think of something?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Incarceration is that where you don't know what to expect when you're going into a 25-year sentence as a 17-year-old. You don't know what to expect. You don't know how to deal with that type of time mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and it takes a toll. It takes a toll on your mind, it takes a toll on your heart, it takes a toll on your spirit, dealing with the oppression, right? And so that was another point where it was just like, oh, it's much, it's too much, almost where I can't bear. So I need some assistance, I need some help. For me, that help was a higher power. So I had to call on to a higher power to help me through those harsh conditions of oppression and incarceration. And so once I seen that the higher power, once I called upon the higher power, in the case for me, it's Allah, right? That's the religion I believe in, is Islam. And so when I called upon the higher power, I felt that I didn't have sense, I had purpose, and then I almost feel it almost feel as if my soul was being lifted up after being suppressed for so long. I was able to now finally feel my soul and my spirit rise step by step, process by process. And so that's what I call resiliency in the face of oppression, in the face of incarceration, where it's stomping down, if you will, on your throat, right? All the way to the point where you can feel it in your spirit. And you don't give up in that moment. You don't give up at that point. In fact, you call in for assistance, help, Ya Allah, spare me, forgive me, help me in this moment. And that call to prayer for me was the call to rise, and I rose. That's resiliency to me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That there's a level of humbling that I hear in that, because we think of ourselves in no particular way, but when you get to the point where you reach out to help, spiritual help, and realize you kind of give yourself to somebody, to a deity looking to help you. It
Yes.
it it, it mirrors going. It really feels like it mirrors incarceration.
Mhm,
You go to jail, and they just take your freedom.
mhm,
And then when you finally get to leave, maybe it's the same thing when you give yourself to Allah, and then you just this freedom that you find, because all the negativity goes away. You have something to focus on. It seems almost typical when we talk about Black men going to jail, that they'll find religion or something.
mhm.
Was that something that happened early? when you went in? Was it something that happened through time? How did it manifest for you?
Thank you for the question. So yes, to your point, most men, especially black men in America, find religion in prison. There's a reason for that. The reason for that is because you have to be removed from society in the ill wills of society, in the evils of society, and placed in a position where you can't move and you can't run around and do what you want to do, but you're stuck here to deal with yourself and deal with your crime and deal with you. And so in that, most people find it hard to deal with themselves. So they escape through some form of escapism in incarceration while you're in prison, right? Whether that's drugs or what have you. But others, on the other hand, like myself, we find that through religion. Now, for me, I wasn't looking for religion, bro. It wasn't something that was just like on the top of my head, like, hey, when I get to prison, I'm gonna find God. That just wasn't the process for me. Like for me, going into prison, I was still gang banging, so I was still part of that lifestyle and part of that mentality. So going in it, my mindset was on survival, politics, and tribal politics within prison politics. That was my mindset. And so how I came about with being introduced to Islam was we're in Calipatria State Prison. For those who know, they call Calipatria nickname Death Valley. That's the nickname for Calipatria State Prison. And in that prison, that's what's happening. A whole lot of death, whether that's through violence or whether that's through the sun and its flares at 133-degree weather Fahrenheit in the afternoon, 1 o'clock. So I mean, that's why they call it the Death Valley. The weather conditions are very, very harsh. And so sitting in these prisons and on those yards, it's really nothing for young men to do, right? They don't have no services for us. They're not putting us in any type of classes to reform us or rehabilitate us or giving us any skills, right? They're saying that the budget for that or the funding for that is limited. So people are not going to classes. So they had a sign-in sheet for Arabic class. And me being a young, intelligent brother and just always wanting to go on a quest of curiosity and learn new things, I was like, hey, what's the benefit or not the benefit of learning this language? Let me take it on, right? And so that's what I did. I took it on and discovered that it was more than just learning the language, because when you learn the Arabic language, you're actually learning you're actually learning the religion simultaneously. The religion is tied into the language.
Right. Okay. All right. That's amazing. That's quite the story. And with what you came out of jail or prison with, this is a weird question. Given the opportunity to change your past, knowing how you came out, would you do this again?
Man, that's a good question. Would I do it again? And if I'm understanding the question correctly, you mean would I repeat everything that happened in life again?
Yeah, essentially, yes.
I I guess twofold. That's a twofold answer, right? One of the answers is yes, because of all of the things that I've learned through this experience, and through that experience, it's made me and conditioned me and formed me to the man that I am now. So I would say yes in that regards. But then again, on the flip side of that coin, I would say, had I know what I know now and have the knowledge, and then going back to the past, would I repeat everything? Of course not, right? That's contradicting all of the learned experiences, knowledge, and everything else that came with this, right? So I guess I answered my question or your question.
Right. So it's one and the same. So knowing where you are now, you're enlightened, you're obviously a better man because of what you experienced. So we wonder just how bad of an experience it was, and was it worth what you've become. But of course, looking back, I don't want to go to jail, I don't want to do any of those things, and that's understandable. But because you now have come out and you were a writer, a poet, you've done so much, you are a teacher to a lot of us young men who are growing up, but you learned a language and gained a religion. I like to ask men this because I always find it particularly interesting. You have been taught,
Mhm.
and you teach.
Mhm.
Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer learning or teaching?
Both, both. And I'll tell you why. Because in order for you to be a great leader, you must follow. That's how I see teaching and learning, right? I see teaching and learning as following and leading. So, yes, I want to learn as much as I possibly could so I could be in a position to teach. And I learned that through incarceration, where again, we're under tribal order, but sometimes the chiefs of the tribe are, going to other places, right? And so it leaves the Indian or the Indians to no chieftain. So you have to create one, so to speak, right? I'm just kind of giving you the analogy. So with that thinking, what comes with that is educating yourself to the point where then you can educate others. And that's also a principle of just memorization. In fact, that's a technique that Jim Quick, I don't know if you know about him in his book, Limitless. These are techniques that he used in his book, right? Where once you learn something, then the next step is to teach others so that learning is, so to speak, fermented inside your memory bank and it's there for long term.
Okay. Okay. Like that answer. Thank you for that. We'll skip the I. We'll come back to that. The next letter in the word prize is Z, and the word is zeal.
Mm.
Enthusiastic devotion. You come out, you're no longer incarcerated. You are out in the world. You have blessed us with your writings, with your teachings, with your enthusiasm. And I feel like it's all encompassing. It's a lot of what you do. It represents a lot for you. What do you do for yourself when you're not teaching, when you're not spreading the, what do you do to relax? What is the thing for you, not for friends or family? As men, we carry the weight of the world. When you put the weight of the world down, what do you do for you?
Thank you for the question. So the first thing I think about is, how do I decompress?
Yes.
How do I heal? How do I counsel myself, or how do I use natural therapies, natural remedies to have that therapy? That's what I think of when you ask that question. So the answer to the question is, I often go to oceans and beaches and sunbath. And what I learned through that process is I get spiritual downloads from the sun when I'm sunbathing, right? Because the sun, as we know, the energy from the sun is communicating and it's absorbing into my melanated skin, thus giving me an update or a download. So these are the type of things that I do. Then I go to parks or lagoons to take my socks off and put my feet inside the grass. And reasons for that is, when I was incarcerated, there was a time period where I lost sensory perception of how trees felt and how grass felt and how animals looked, based on I was confined and away from animals and all natural things for so long. So I lost the natural sensory perception of it. So now that I'm out here and I'm enjoying my freedom, I do just that, relish in my freedom and take my socks off so I can have that sensory perception again with the grass and with the ocean water, and overseeing the lagoons and looking at the water. For me, that's therapy. For me, that's medicine. For me, that's meditation. For me, that's prayer. For me, that's gratitude.
Feel you. I feel you. Just to ask, so when you were finally let go, when you were out of being incarcerated, what's the first thing you did when you finally were out? What like was the first thing you ate? What's the first place you walked? What was the thing you did to really like, oh, I'm free? Like what
Yeah,
was that?
yeah. So funny note actually. So before I was actually released, there was a prank played on me with the correctional officers. And so the prank they often do is, right before they release you out the gate, they tell you, "Oh, you have a warrant in another county." Yeah. This is a prank they do. Cold prank. Cold
Oh
prank.
God.
So
Wow.
they did just that on me, and my heart dropped. Like, what? No, y'all confused. Like, I ain't never been in that county. Like, y'all tripping, right? It's like the worst thing someone would want to think about right when they about to step foot out of prison, right? So anyway, that happened to me. And I'm just so much of a person who is just like, hey, if it's meant, it's meant. If it's not, it's not. So I had a great attitude about it. So although they were doing the prank, I still went along with the prank. And then even after the prank, I laughed with them, right? Because it was like, it was like one of those moments where it's like, I didn't think too much into it anyway. So anyway, after that, first thing I did to answer your question was I made what they call in Islam sajda. Sajda is when you go into the most humbling position that is humanly possible to submit yourself wholeheartedly to the divine will of a higher power. That's the first thing I did. Then once I rose myself from the position of sajda, I hugged my brothers who was there to greet me at the entrance point of the prison. Got in the car and got on the phone. First time using the technology, so it was kind of hard to navigate it. Right. And got right on the phone with my mother and my auntie, and I tell them I'm on my way. I'm on my way, And it felt so powerful, so special, and so divine in that moment because my mother was the one who told me that if I left up outside of her house when I was 17 years old and caught this case, that if I was to leave her house and didn't listen to her and disobey her instructions, she wouldn't see me again for a long, 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 long time. And so it was almost like a prediction that she had on my life at the time. So to go back to my mother after all of that time, it was just a feeling of straight jubilance. That's the best way I can describe it. It was just complete pure joy and happiness.
That's good. It's good to hear. I do have to ask, what was it like? I mean, you're happy to be free, but what was it like walking back into that house, knowing where you came from because of your actions? Was there any fear, regret, disappointment? What obviously, like she's so happy to see you, but you had to have a whole lot of emotions running through you.
Absolutely. I think for me it was just being there and being present with my mother, looking into her eyes, immersing myself all in her love and her warmth. Same with my aunt, that's her sister, and so I loved on both of them. And for me, that was the only thinking, and that was the only thing that I wanted to feel at that time because I was deprived of my mother's hug and my mother's kiss and my mother's touch for 15 years. So to get back into that, to kiss her after all of that time, and now mind you, that was always the longing, if you will, to kiss my mother and to hug my mother and to be in the presence of my mother. That was always something that I longed for, something I always desired it within my heart for all of those years. So to finally have the moment to see my mother and hug her and kiss her, I mean, I don't have to tell you how that felt, man.
I know that's amazing. I know that has to be amazing. So this experience led you to writing Grit, Grind, and Glory. Talk
Yeah.
about what that experience is. When did you decide to write it? How long did it take? What kind of motivation did you have? Tell us about an incredible piece that you wrote.
Yeah, man. Thank you for the question. So I decided to write Grit, Grind, and Glory around 2002. And it was a point in time where I was already a writer. I was already writing poetry. And the best thing I could have done was saved all of the compilation of my work and saved all of my writings and this and that. And it came to me where I was going through my material and I seen one page that I had to write in a self-help class that had it was one page, but how I write like if it's a blank page, I'll fill the whole page up, but I'll fold the paper up in 4 squares, if that makes sense. And so that's what I did, and I wrote an overview of my life. And once I did that, the thought came to mind that not only do I have an interesting story, but my story needs to be shared. My story needs to be told, and my story needs to be documented. So that was like the intentions behind it. Like I need to document my process. I need to document what I went through and the experiences I went through and endured to better help someone who's possibly going down the same pathway, or for the ones who's looking for that, okay, what's next? I can possibly also provide that solution for those too. So that was the intentions behind writing Grit, Grind, and Glory.
Okay. Okay. what was, I mean, you're writing, so you're writing your experience. Was there a different feeling for you as you're writing your experience, as you're putting it to paper? Like, this is what I went through, and let me write it down. So almost in a way, experiencing it again. What was it like when you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it's always like that as a writer, especially when you're going back into dealing with and dive into yourself, old traumas, old past, old pains, old injuries, right? So that's always uncomfortable. But what gave me to the advantage in that process was I'd done a lot of self-help work already. I've done a lot of deep diving already. I've done a lot of self reflections and rehabilitation already. I've done a lot of, forgiving of others and forgiving of myself already in this process. So to revisit my past now in writing wasn't so hard, wasn't so harsh, wasn't so re-traumatizing, right? If that makes sense. So it's easier for me to go back, revisit, and then also process. Okay, what was the feelings? What was the thoughts? How do I react to some of these events? And so that was the process.
Okay. Sounds like it was cathartic. Sounds like it was a good thing for you. You went through a lot that even men, I guess, that were, not incarcerated and free, are things that we don't do. You had the opportunity to really look into yourself, think about things that you've done and what I could have done better, make better decisions, all these great things. We take for granted that we just walking around and we don't like to look into ourselves. It's a tough thing to do, to stand in front of a mirror
Mhm.
and look at our actions. So
That's a
again, I applaud you, because we don't all get to do it, and you did it in
yeah,
not the best of places. So you
yeah.
came out, which is wonderful. The last letter in the word prize is E. The word is expectation. Expectation is a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. In 5 years, where you going to be?
TV. I'll be on TV. I'll be on TV shows, TV series, documentaries, movies, more books. Youth coach. By that time, I'll probably have my youth oasis, which is my dream, is to have a youth oasis, a place, a safe space where youth can come, thrive, be themselves, be empowered, be encouraged, and leave out leaders going back into their communities to impart change. So that's the bigger dream. That's the bigger vision. But yeah, 5 years, absolutely. Big screen.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So, how many books how many books are you gonna write? Obviously, you've done a few. You got a second one coming. When it's all said and done, am I gonna need a bookcase for all these books that you've done written? Like, what are you thinking? Do you have a number, or are you just gonna pump them out as much
You
as you
know
can?
what? I don't really have a number. However, I would say this: expect more books for sure. Expect more books. There's a lot of creativity in me still. There's a lot of poems that still needs to be added. So, for instance, this new poetry book is going to also have an addition. So, there's going to be another volume to it where I'm adding more poetry. So yes, expect that. And then I want to dive into some fiction, right? I want to work my hand and work my magic with that and see what type of creative storylines I could tell from a fictional standpoint. So I definitely going to be having more books in the coming future for sure. Would I say enough to fill a bookshelf? Probably not.
I got a pretty big one, but I'll be happy to load them up. So I saved the I in prize because it's a different question. I doesn't represent a word, but it really represents you. So when we take off the titles, the shackles, everything, we would see you as formerly incarcerated, author, poet, friend, son, brother, all these things that we do, as opposed to who we are. My question is, after everything you've been through, and when you take all the stuff off of you, and it's just you at your core, who are you?
I'm my court man. I'm a servant. I'm a servant. I'm a servant to others. I'm a servant to myself. I'm a servant to my environment. I'm a servant to animals, other beings. So at heart, I'm a servant. And then aside from that, I'm a kind person. And what encompasses a kind person that's within me is giving another person in need a kind word, or giving another person in need who may be struggling, let's say emotionally, that hug of support, that kind hug of support, or that person who can, provide advice for a person who's kind of struggling and on a fence, offering that kind word of support, right? So I think in addition to me being a servant, my also role is to also be that kind person for others and myself, because I got to stay kind in myself too, man. That's important.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. I have two more questions for you. So I asked that three maybe. So there's two things that I ask men because it's important as men that we recognize how important it is to have companions in this world, to have friends. So my first question to you is this. We can't, I don't account for family, don't account for brothers or your whatever, stuff like that. Do you have a friend, a man that if something went down, if you did something just dumb, something you shouldn't have done, could you got somebody you could call at 3 a.m. like, yo, it's Anthony. I did some dumbish. I don't know why I did it. I need to talk. Do you have a person, a friend who you can trust, where you could lay your troubles down at his feet and you know it's safe, that he's not going to mess with you? He's not going to run and tell the world that it's safe. Do you have that kind of friend in this world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let me share the importance of having that friend in this world. The importance of having that friend in this world would be the equivalent of when you're in trouble on a football field. It's fourth quarter, fourth and inches. We're about to get to the field goal or the touchdown. And in this moment, something happens within a team. What do? For me, you call a timeout. That's that person for me. I can call a timeout in the case of the emergency, in the case of chaos, in the case of being indecisive, in the case of maybe second guessing, in all of these type of situations. But this person has to have qualifications. This person has to have conditions that's built into it, right? So I'll give you an example of it is this person that I confide in has to be a person of God, because I know that he's going to be operating from a place of morality and operating from a place of a spiritual compass that's not going to lead me astray or giving me some false and wrong information that's not going to benefit me. So that's the importance of having that person. And yes, I have that person in my life.
That is wonderful. A lot of men, we still struggle with friendship. We struggle with having those kind of people in our corner. We struggle with being in our brother's corner. So I love when I hear men that they have somebody to be there for them. With that said, why the title Grit, Grind, and Glory?
Oh, that's an easy one. It encompassed my whole life. Going through the grit of losing my father and going through the nastiness of the inner city syndrome and all of the conditions and ills and evils of that society. And then going to the grind, going into the penitentiary system and learning how to be a self-entrepreneur, learning how to leverage coffee and turn coffee into currency, grinding to the point where no one is sending me money, but I'm receiving income by the way of trading and bargaining through coffee and other means, and then receiving the glory because I was so bold enough, encouraged enough to go within myself to address my childhood trauma, address my childhood pain, address my childhood suffering, only to submit myself to a higher power who then thus gives me the glory. Grit, grind, and glory.
I like that. I like that. You've lived a lot more of a life than a lot of us have. So these questions I find interesting. First question: what are you afraid of that you cannot control?
I think probably losing my mother.
That's just something that's going to happen. That happens to all of us. That's it. What are you afraid of that you can control?
I don't really have a fear there or anything that I'm scared of that I can't control. Because and the reason why I say that is because if I'm afraid of something that I can't control, then I have to reassess it. I have to rethink it. I have to wait. First of all, why am I scared to begin with if I have control of the situation? So my thought is, you know what? Instead of being scared and putting myself in this flight fright type of situation in my own head, how about get out of my head and refer this to a mentor, refer this to a close friend or associate, or refer this to someone within my team to get the real answer of the problem or resolve it in an appropriate and professional way.
Okay. All right. My last question. If you, and I think your book answered the question, so let's just change it. Let's say there's a young man who's watching or listening, and he hasn't gotten to the book yet, and he will soon, but he's at a crossroads right now with life. He's lost somebody close to him. He doesn't have a shoulder to cry on. He doesn't have a person that he can express his emotions to. So right now he's in a real tender seems the wrong word, but he's at it. This is a moment right now. If you got in front of him, what would you say to him right now?
Oh man, great question. It reminds me of how I closed my book. And I closed my book with a quote from our Prophet Muhammad, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he says that if you feel as if the world is ending right before your eyes, don't be concerned with the fate of the world. Plant your seeds. So, in other words, do your work, make your work, whatever that may be. It may be creativity, it may be art, it may be basketball, but whatever it is that you believe you can do within yourself, you do that. Don't be concerned with everything that's outside of you. Focus on what you're good at. Focus on your strength. Focus on what you know you can execute. Focus on where you know you can focus down, hone in, and become great, if not for others within you, or if not for others, for your own self and for your own sake. So that's what I would say. Like, don't be concerned about what's going on around you, because things around you it can turn catastrophic within a second. Be more concerned about who you are and what you can do. That's what I would say.
That's wonderful. Great words. This was a great conversation. I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk. Where can people find your books, your social media? This is all you. Where can we find you, sir?
Yeah. So first of all, I have 2 books out, Grit, Grind, and Glory, and also My Life in Poetry, my latest book that just dropped last week on Thursday. You can find both of these books on my website, gritgrindandglory.com. I also have merch there. You see this beautiful t-shirt, Grit, Grind, and Glory. Those are my merch. This is how you represent me, and this is how you feel proud and prideful about a success story. So when you wear this shirt, you're actually wearing the brand of someone who's actually a living success story, a living legend, if you will. And all of that can be purchased on my website. Also on Amazon. If you want to purchase the book on Amazon, you can go to Amazon. The book is there for purchase. Some people are not in the time of reading. So I also have available the Audible book version, right? And so you can go on audible.com to receive that. Or once again, my website, you can receive the Audible book, Grit, Grind, and Glory, on my website. Amazon, my website.
Excellent.
Also, my social media handle, Instagram, Grit, Grind _Glory, Facebook, Anthony Marshawn McDuffie Jr., TikTok, Grit, Grind, and Glory.
Fantastic. All of that information will be in the episode notes. This is a wonderful conversation. Typically, this ends a kind of way. I like to say specific words to my listeners, but we're going to do it different. I have a poet on, and we're going to let him do it. But what I'm going to say is this. Thank you, Anthony, for coming on here. To my listeners and watchers, thank you for being here and catching on to this content. It's done for the men in our lives, not just me, not just Anthony, all the men in our lives. We need to make it comfortable, easy for men to talk about life. And that's what this is for. Make sure you check in on the men in your lives. We may seem happy, but you never really know what a man is going through. So a simple word, that hug. Anthony knows about that hug. Sometimes that hug is the one thing that's missing. Make sure you do it. You don't realize it, that you could change somebody's life with like 5 minutes of attention, or that one hug, or that one kiss, or that one compliment, or that conversation. You don't know the kind of power you have with the men until you use it. So take advantage. Your
Yes.
voice is really something that can help so many people. There's so many people who can't wait for you to show up. You make people's day better. Never forget that. So, as a reminder, you men are wonderful. You guys are special and you are the prize. And we will end this episode with some words from Anthony McDuffie. I'll see you next week. Go ahead.
And I'll take it away. This poem is going to be entitled from my book, My Life in Poetry. And this poem is entitled The Struggle. The struggle of life begins in the cradle, before the umbilical cord is cut from the navel. Danger and difficulties we face each day. The cure to most of these struggles in the ghettos is to pray. Mental and physical challenges arises through earnest attempts to fight to survive. To achieve our progress, you must constantly try. Like survive, like South Africa in the years of apartheid. Like survive, like Gaza facing genocide. What is struggle? And why do so many suffer from its afflictions? Struggle to me is battle and addictions. Like a fly trapped in a spider's web, slowly anticipating death, not to mention the silent torture in the self. To contend with adversity is to struggle, to strive, to grow, to climb. Struggle is the mountain climber struggling to reach the mountaintop. No matter the struggle, we cannot stop the struggle.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Powerful
brother.
words. Of course. Have a good one. I'll see you guys next week.